The 605 taught Colt the first hard lesson that even affects what we have today. You can't just cut the barrel. The gas system has to move with it. It was their first attempt to cut the 20-inch M16 barrel for Spec Ops and immediately encountered a core problem that affects every AR-15 even till today. That is the dwell time that measures from the gas port to the barrel crown. The shorter it is, the less pressure it generates to cycle the action. So Colt drilled the gas port bigger to force more gas through faster. It helped a little, but still not enough. So then, Colt went back to actually engineer one. But before the carbine, they got distracted with a machine gun project named the Model 606. So picture the bar from World War II, but in 5.56 to lay down covering fire for the squad. They even built a belt-fed version. The idea was to use M16 parts and to basically build a machine gun out of it. But here's the problem. It got hot and it couldn't stay fed. This was a time when the 30-round magazine wasn't a thing just yet, besides those 20-round mags. Colt may have built just a few, but they've moved on. And decades later, the U.S. Marines went back to a gun with similar concept, which was the M27 to replace some of the belt-fed machine gun rolls in the squad. But long story short, the 606 didn't go far, and they discarded it and moved on to the Model 607. This is the first AR-15 ever built with a sliding stock. The pitch was to make it into a submachine gun with a 10-inch barrel. It's small enough for a SEAL or a Delta guy to carry where a full rifle wouldn't go. But the problem with a barrel this short is its massive fireball and concussion when rounds are going off. Imagine firing right next to someone in a tight hallway. That's not very pleasant while you have other things added to the combat anxiety. So Colt screwed a device called the Moderator to knock that flash and that blast back down a little. And it also helped mimic some additional dwell time to cycle the gun better. Colt built only a few of these, and it was never a production gun. But it was a proof of concept at this point in history. Now that Colt has something to work with, they built the next thing for pilots. The Model 608 had one job. Picture a downed pilot who just ejected over enemy jungle. All they've got is a pistol. Colt thought it was a better idea to give them a rifle instead. So the Model 608 looks like this. It looked like a bare, minimal rifle, almost like a PVC pipe looking thing from a distance. But the problem with this one was inside the buffer. Early guns used a thing called an edgewater buffer. So instead of weights and a spring in it, it used little cone-shaped washers stacked inside each other to soak up the shock. It sounded clever, but it fell apart when it got wet, which for a jungle survival gun is about the worst possible failure. The Air Force didn't want them at the time, but that problem never went away, and people at the top are always thinking about it. Now this brings us to the XM177 and the Commando model. The 609 is the one your brain already pictures when someone says Vietnam carbine. This is the first short M16 that got engineered instead of hacked together. And it's the first one the military actually bought in numbers. A Colt engineer fixed the two worst parts of the 607, and they built a simple, tough, two-position retractable stock. And just look at that. That's pretty much the M4 stock that we have today, and that was the 60 years early version, way before you were even born. Now the Moderator was still on the front to take that fireball and knock the flash and noise back down. But it fouled up fast. Basically, it made tracers fly crooked. Around this time, the National Firearms Act was in place, and that slight decibel change under that law, a little, is enough to met the legal definition of a silencer. The NFA restriction was a Colt problem. Pentagon could care less about it. Colt is a business. A big chunk of its money came from selling these carbines to foreign militaries and domestic agencies. Once the Moderator counted as a suppressor, every one of those sales got buried in paperwork and export restrictions. So, Colt had a strong reason to pivot and offer a 14.5 rifle with pinned and welded flash hider instead. But another issue was not having the chamber chromed so it can corrode and jam. and the 10-inch barrel still killed dwell time. This is the part everyone mixes up, so watch closely. The Army wanted a forward assist on the M16A1. The Air Force didn't. So the 609 with the forward assist is the Army's XM177E1. E1 stands for the first experimental version. The 610 without it is the plain XM177 and the Air Force's GAU-5. At this point, they were thinking about increasing that dwell time just a little, so they went into the second experimental model, the 177E2. So this time, they stretched the barrel from 10 inches to 11.5. That inch and a half did three things. It brought back a chunk of velocity. It quieted the gun down a hair, and it left just enough barrel out front to hang a grenade launcher. The Army put it on a test and found that extra barrel length added over 200 feet per second and also shaved the noise down by about only 1 decibel. A 1 decibel change is basically nothing to a human ear. The velocity gain was the real payoff, and the longer barrel mattered far more for mounting the grenade launcher than for sound. And then the biggest fix you can't see from the outside was that they chrome-lined the chamber. That one change killed most of the extraction jams that plagued the earlier guns. Same trick that fixed some of the early M16s. So now, this gun still wasn't perfect, and the Army knew it. The tracers still tumbled. The buffer let the fire rate swing all over the place in bursts. And that moderator still gunked up until it stopped quieting anything. The Army even wrote up a plan to finish developing it. A budget, the whole thing. Then Vietnam started winding down and nobody funded it. Just about every MACV-SOG recon team that went across the fence, the Air Force version with no forward assist, went on the Sun Tay raid to bust in of a POW camp, some of them wearing early red dot sights. And that 11.5-inch barrel, people still run it today. It was born right here. By now, the understanding is this. If you're still following along, the 5.56 is a small bullet, and it does its damage by coming apart at high speed. A 20-inch M16 pushes that round out around 3 times the speed of sound. That's 3,100 feet per second. The short 177 loses 10% of that speed. Roughly speaking, every inch costs you about 25 feet per second. By the 70s, Colt had 2 headaches with the Commando, and they were different kinds. One was engineering because the short barrel still fought the gas system. The other was business. That moderator counted as a suppressor under federal law, and that made the gun a nightmare for Colt to sell and export like we have covered earlier. So the paperwork strangled all of it. Go to a plain 14.5-inch barrel with a normal flash hider, then both headaches go away at once. So they tried something different. Instead of a 10-inch barrel with a giant can, this was the fix. This is the answer they'd been circling since the 605. At 14.5 inches, you can move the gas port back and still leave plenty of barrel in front of it to mount a bayonet, and the dwell time is also better. And now Colt could finally square away the business headache they were dealing with involving the National Firearms Act. The 651 had the full fixed stock for the Army. The 652 dropped the forward assist for the Air Force. Same story as always. So the dwell problem was kind of resolved, and now Colt just had to bolt the good stock back on. And that gives you the gun that basically is the grandfather of the early M4. And this one actually got around quite a bit because Rangers and Navy SEALs ran it from Grenada to Panama. And thousands of them went to Israel. Those chopped Israeli carbines you've seen, a lot of them started as 653s. So every 14.5 carbine on this list, all the way up to the M4, they weren't even stamped as government property. They were just experiments. But hold that thought because it explains the next 2 guns. The Colt 723 was the Mogadishu carbine that Delta guys had back in the day. It's got one foot in the old Vietnam era and the other in the modern M4 world. Delta Force actually bought these from the commercial market to make them short for various close-quarter missions. The early ones were almost identical to the 653, same pencil barrel, same aluminum stock, but there was one real change under the hood, and it's a very important one. which was the twist rate. They went from 1 in 12 to 1 in 7 because the ammo changed from M193 to M855. The new heavier 62 grain round wouldn't stabilize, and it tumbles and keyholes right through the paper. That faster 1 in 7 twist is on most ARs right now, so it traces straight back to this gun. The optics changed, the lights changed, but the rifle? It's the same gun soldiers carry now in an older skin. The 723 carried Delta right up to the mid-90s, but the Army was already buying the next number over. The 727 is the 723's slightly newer cousin. It brought the M16A2 upgrades onto the carbine. The A2 barrel is thicker, which normally blocks a grenade launcher. So Colt cut a step into the barrel so the 203 could still clamp on. Now the last one is the XM4. This one represents the bridge between Vietnam-era XM177 and modern carbine. It was everything that the M16A2 had, but directly evolved into the M4. You can see these changes here on the screen. If you want to learn more about what has changed to make the older M16 work better over almost 2 decades, you can check out this one right here.